Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and we are so excited today. As you know, it is April 30th, the last day of April, and it is also the last business day of this month. So we have our 11th episode of Finding Colorado's Next Governor. I'm very excited. We have with us candidate Greg Lopez. He is a Republican candidate running for governor. Congratulations, Greg.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Yes, of course. And as always, we have Cobert president with us, Jeff Wasden, in studio to answer these, or to ask these questions, not answer.
I can answer them too if you need help. Just let me know.
Okay.
And we also have Ed Sealover here with us. He is with the Denver Business Journal, who we partnered with on this series. And so I'm going to let you guys go ahead and just jump right in and give Greg these questions. He's super psyched.
There you go.
Ready to go.
Well, Greg, we really want to spend some time talking a little bit about you and your background and what got you interested in running for governor to start with. But we're going to do a part A and B to that because, holy cow, I think your life changed a little bit after state assembly. And
It did.
I'm assuming that there were some people that were very shocked across the state to see you make 33%,
That's correct.
if I've got my number correct. Talk a little bit about assembly and that process and hearing that. I know I saw the Facebook live shots of you and their reaction,
Right.
like, holy cow.
Holy cow.
We're censored,
Holy
FCC,
cow.
right? Holy blankety blank, right? I made the ballot. So, yeah, talk about it. It's just exciting. And congrats, as Alex said.
Well, thank you. It was an exciting day. We had traveled the state, been spending a lot of time in living rooms, diners, talking to people, trying to connect with them, trying to hear their story. And so walking into the state assembly, we felt good. We felt good that we had a good base. You never know, right? You never know until they cast the ballots, and so, my wife was nervous when we took the stage, and she did an awesome job, accepting doing the second nomination. And so, after I made my remarks and I was trying to walk my way back to the seat, a lot of people were stopping me and saying, "Hey, you did a real great job," and so I feel good. But you really don't know, until you see that board. And, there were 7 of us, so the odds of making sure how many would come out of there, was kind of a nail biter. And when I saw that we had gotten over the 30% threshold, at the same time, it was a great reliever because I knew we were moving forward. But as I was waiting, right, I was thinking of all the hard hours that we'd put together, the team, everything that we'd put together to make sure that we could connect. And so all those, 6 months where we're just kind of flashing through, wondering, did we do everything right? And of course, it came out that, yeah, we want you to keep moving. So yeah, this, I tell people, it's like the Triple Crown, right? We won the first race. Now we're going into the second race, and it gets a little faster. So.
Well, it's an exciting day, an exciting time. Let's take a step back now to my initial question.
Right.
That really, we want folks that are listening, and certainly we'll provide podcasts that you can share with your audience. But talk a little bit about Greg Lopez, the person,
Sure.
and your background, and what qualifications you've had that have prepared you to be on this ballot running for governor.
Well, I'll tell you, I come from humble beginnings. My mom and dad were migrant workers. They worked hard in the fields, and when I was 5, they decided that they wanted a different life for their boys. But all the time, they taught us to have a strong faith in God, believe in your family, work hard, be honest, be compassionate, and help people. If you can help them, in whatever capacity that might be. And so that's, like I said, I come from very humble beginnings. I don't forget where I come from. In order for me to be able to get into higher education, I had to join the military. My parents couldn't afford to send me to any of us boys to college. So I joined the military. I spent 4 years in the Air Force, ended up losing 87% hearing in my right ear due to jet engines. I was a weapons specialist. So I worked out on the fly line. But I tell people, it was a good trade-off because I got a chance to meet my soulmate. I met my wife while I was in the military. We've been married 30 years. And I do have an excuse now that sometimes when she asks us if I'm listening to her, sometimes, it all depends on where she's sitting.
Fair enough.
But I'm the only veteran. I'm the only veteran running for governor on both sides of the aisle. I was very fortunate. I was elected mayor of Parker, Colorado at the age of 27.
Back up a second. What does that mean to you when you say you're the only veteran running? What skills did you learn from your time there that I think helps you to use that as a differentiator?
Well, what you learn in the military, specifically from basic, right? In basic, we all come in and we all have different identities. We all have different backgrounds. And so in basic, what they do is they teach you that this is a team effort, right? So everybody has to work together. Everybody needs to understand that this is a mission. This is not a job. You have signed up for a mission to protect the United States of America. This is not a job that you go 4 to 5. This is something that you've committed to, something that you and your brothers, you become a band of brothers, right? And your brothers, you work together to make sure that the mission gets accomplished. And so I learned leadership. I learned chain of command. I learned to listen. I learned to follow instructions and look at things in their totality. As when you're in the military, you don't have the luxury just to have tunnel vision. You have to look around. You have to make sure you know where everybody is. You have to understand the totality of the mission. And I think that's helped me a lot throughout the course of my life, is to be able to understand that, there's a bigger purpose than one individual person in any type of business or in any type of government entity. And so that's what I learned. And I could tell you there's probably three individuals that I would take a bullet for. If it was between us and I needed to stand in front of them, I would take the bullet because.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wasn't one of the
No. But that's how close the military is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really how close you can come, when you have that relationship. And so, when I was 27, I was elected mayor in Parker. And again, I was not supposed to win. I was not supposed to be any of the candidates. I ran against the incumbent mayor. I ran against a bank president. I ran against a retired school teacher that became a real estate agent. And they were all 15 years my senior. I'd been in the town probably a year and a half when I ran. And I got elected by, I think it was 27 votes. At the end of the day. And all I did was what I'm doing now, was just talking to people, knocking on doors, listening, trying to understand some of their concerns. And it was a strong mayor form of government. So I was the mayor and the city manager simultaneously. So all the department heads reported directly to me, and they were all 15, 20 years my senior. So transportation, I sat on the board of E470. Economic development, regional growth. I sat on the board of the Denver Regional Council of Governments. So I understand water issues. I understand zoning. I understand platting. I understand the complexity of how do you create a community with business, small business, education needs, roads, transportation, trails, all those types of things. And I did it for 4 years. And my wife came to me, it was up for election, and she goes, what, I really need you to be a husband and a father. My son was going on 4, my daughter was going on 1. I said, what, you're absolutely right. I'll become a husband and a father, because I was always gone as a political mayor, as you can imagine. And so I stepped aside.
Now, before we get to this part of your life, what do you consider your most important accomplishment as Parker mayor?
There are two things that stand out the most for me. One is the Parker Recreation Center. Okay. As mayor, I didn't vote unless there was a split vote. That was the only time that I would vote on council. And so the Parker Recreation Center was always a split vote. It was a split vote when we were looking to even approve the drawings. There was a split vote even when we were changing the paint style from flat to semi-gloss. I mean, everything. So I had to break every single vote on the rec center. So I can tell you that I feel that if it wasn't for me, that rec center wouldn't have gotten built. And it was a jewel of the community. The other one is, it's not often that an elected official truly knows whether they made the right decision. You always hope that you make the right decision. You always hope that you truly are keeping your hand on the pulse of the community. But there was an annexation called the Jacobson property, and it was a big annexation. It was so big I couldn't even hold meetings in council chambers. I had to move them out to the rec center into the gymnasium because we were having 300-400 people show up. Long story short, one of my council members had a conflict. We had to remove him from the panel. All the referral agencies said, no, this is not good for the town. yet the council approved it. They got approved on a 3-2 vote. They had forgotten that I had veto power. So I vetoed the project. And I vetoed the project after the council meeting. And I think one of the most surprising things to me is that people got emotional in the audience because they had worked so hard to try to stop it. And yet they saw a government just approve it. And then they saw me stop it. And so then the developer decided to take it to the vote of the people. And so they put it on the ballot. The vote came back 2-1 in my favor. And so the community of Parker validated my decision to veto the project. And I can tell you that's probably the one time that I know that I made the right decision for the community because they validated it.
Let's jump right into some policy and dive right in here to make sure, again, we give you an opportunity to share your views on some critical issues, one of those being energy policy. There's a lot of discussion right now regarding setbacks and forced pooling, local control, the keep it in the ground movement. Where are you at with our energy policy under a Greg Lopez for governor? How do you view the extractive fossil fuel industry in this state?
Well, I will tell you, really what the discussion is, it's about property rights. What we're looking at here is individuals that want to utilize their property rights, their mineral rights, and then you have the surface rights, and there's this conflict. For me, it's looking at how do we preserve each individual rights, and predominantly what you're finding is that a lot of people have safety concerns, and they should have safety concerns when they don't understand an industry and that type of stuff. But I've looked at the entire energy, the fracking and oil and gas, and I'm a strong advocate that we need that energy. We need that type of industry here in Colorado. I'm a formal financial advisor, and I would never tell my clients, put all your investments in the bond market, and because that's the safest place to put it. We need to have a diversified energy ability here in Colorado. And what I tell people is, look, all this energy that we're talking about, it leaves the state. A lot of this energy services other states as well. So I believe the state has done a very good job in making sure that we have good safety parameters in place. In local jurisdictions, being a former mayor, I understand the concerns of council members and mayors and the residents, but I think it comes to the mayors and the council members to educate their constituents about the fact that we're talking about property rights.
And so how then, it doesn't sound like you are interested in giving any more authority to local governments then. How do you deal with this rising angst that's coming from the tension between local residents and the state, or local residents and the drillers?
You know what, again, I think for me, it's about sitting down and having a mature conversation about what is actually driving this emotion that is causing these camps to really be so aggressive. I know that the Firestone issue was probably the first thing that really got people moving. But when you look at that, it was an accident. Accidents happen. No one really intended that to occur. And the state took some very good steps to try to prevent that in the future. I mean, that's what you do when something happens that no one foresaw. You start to correcting those issues. But, when it comes to the public, and I've dealt a lot of homeowner meetings and understanding, people just want to be heard. Right? They don't want to be told that they don't know what they're talking about. They want to be heard and say, here's our concerns. How can you help us address these concerns? Right? Predominantly it's safety, predominantly it's water quality, all those types of things. But the residents, the moms and dads are concerned about their children, and rightfully so. They're concerned about their neighborhood. But it's really up to the elected officials to have that voice of reason to sit down and talk to them, and explain these situations. If there's things that could be fine-tuned or tweaked, you don't need an overhaul. There could be some areas where you could refine some things to make everybody feel that they're being listened to. The setbacks, I don't see a difference between a 1,000-foot setback or 1,500-foot setback. A setback is a setback. We're talking about the property rights that are underneath the ground. I think a lot of people lose sight of that.
That's one part. You mentioned how much this drives the economy. That's one part of a bigger economic picture here. Tell us about your vision for economic development. Do you feel the current state policy and how we go after companies, recruit them looking for relocation or just for expansion, is the proper way to do it? How would economic development be done in a Greg Lopez governorship?
Well, I can tell you, you know what? There are certain things. A lot of people talk about economic development, and oftentimes people don't even truly understand what that means. They talk about, well, it's more revenue, but there's redevelopment that can also be economic development, right? Abandoned storefronts and those types of things. So here's what I see: the governor's responsibility is to promote, protect, and preserve all the various economies that are out throughout the state that make Colorado the great state that it is. So every jurisdiction is different. You know, I would like to see us grow organically. There's a lot of small businesses in the state of Colorado doing great stuff. You know, I am not one to say, hey, we need to provide incentives to companies from other states to come to Colorado. You know,
and just for clarity, so you don't support any incentives, or just not the current way we provide them?
I don't support necessarily increasing or broadening our current incentives. Okay, the model that we have works. Okay, I think it's enough to put out the welcome mat. Okay, but we're not going to sell the entire store to get somebody in here. Okay, I think it's a very delicate balance. I mean, when I was mayor, you have those tax incentive programs, and you understand that you waive some of the taxes so they can do improvement on the roads and do improvement some other stuff. So you attract them, but at the same time, you know what? You don't want to lose sight that we really want Colorado to be growing organically. We want economic development to spread through all 64 counties. And one of the things that I would do as governor is I would not support focusing all of our efforts on the urban corridor. You know, you got to go to Grand Junction. You got to go to Durango. You got to talk to Pueblo. You got to go to other areas. You know, they have the same quality of life and they have the same type of experience that most companies are looking for. And I would like to, again, see us grow organically, because small business is the heart and soul of any community. You see a community that has vacant storefronts, and that community is hurting. That community is suffering from the economic vitality. So we need to make sure that all 64 counties are experiencing the economic growth that we're talking about here in the urban corridor.
I was going to shift to education, but let me do a quick follow-up then, since you mentioned Metro Denver. I'm in the rural divide here, and the two economies really that Colorado is facing. How does rural broadband and access and support to those rural communities look like from an industry perspective, and how and what is your role as a governor?
Well, first of all, you know what? We cannot allow the industry to say we're not going to go into areas because there's not enough households. You know, there's not enough population out there. You know, I live in rural Colorado. I live in Elizabeth, and I'm proud to say I live off a dirt road. I have a septic tank, and I have a well. You know, but I was the mayor of Parker, so I understand the pressures of a community that's growing and people want, you know, those city lifestyles. I think what we need to do, what Greg Lopez as a governor would talk to these industries and say, look, what we're trying to do here is improve the quality of life for the entire state of Colorado. You know, it's not just about where the mass population is, because when you ignore rural Colorado and you focus on the urban corridors, they feel abandoned. And that's what I hear every time I go out, you know, outside of the 10 counties that are in the main corridor. You go out there and they will tell you, we truly feel that the governor does not truly understand or care about our lifestyles out here. You know, and I've walked those ranches and I've walked, you know, the agricultural fields. And maybe it's because I come from humble beginnings and I don't forget where I come from, that I know that those families are working hard. They're working hard to provide for their kids and to keep that homestead and to put food on their tables. And they're working hard to help others, you know, and we all recognize that the agricultural industry is huge for Colorado. It is wrong for the state to not provide them with the resources and the needs that they deserve just because someone believes there's not enough households out there for us to be able to make a good return on our investment. And I think that's where the governor needs to correct people and say that's not what it's about. It's not about your return on your investment. It's about providing good quality services for the entire state.
Let's transition a little bit to education. I was just on a conference call literally before we walked in for our interview today with the coalition being led by Colorado Succeeds, the Common Sense Policy Roundtable, around the big question, what if Colorado schools were number one? What does that look like? The backdrop last week on Thursday, Friday of teacher walkouts, right? And so we've got a little dynamic and some tension around education funding. You talked about your beginnings and ensuring that you had access to a quality education and how important that is to our state and our state's ability to compete for talent. What does the education policy look like? What would you do as a governor to ensure all Coloradans have access to quality education?
Well, see, and that's the key phrase, right? Quality, because we all have access to education. The question is quality. Everybody has a totally different definition of what quality is. Right? Some would tell you, well, quality education is being able to have our graduates be ready for college day one after they graduate. If they're not ready for college, then that's not quality education. And I would argue that that's not a true statement. I would argue that, look, not everybody's going to go to college. Not everybody can afford to go to college. Not everybody wants to go to college. And a piece of paper from a four-year institution should not define who you are as a person. That should not tell you that you can't make the American dream and provide for your family because you don't have this little piece of paper that says you went to college for 4 years. I believe we need to make sure that people understand that there are those that have the skill sets and the knowledge to be able to have good jobs in the trades, in the workforce. What I would like to see is all of our graduates be ready for work day one when they graduate and have true life skills that they've been taught. Now they can choose whether they want to continue to go on to college because they have the same foundation or they choose to go a different path. The beauty of America is that you can always go to college whenever you choose to, whenever you're ready. There is no age limit when you can't go to college and get that degree. So having a skill that you can pass down to your sons and daughters, but more importantly, tell them that having a job is a blessing. Having a job and being able to produce and provide for yourself and your family, that's the American way.
And so what exactly would you do? What state policy would you put into place to ensure that can happen?
Well, and again, everybody wants...
What would you tell those teachers outside the Capitol in the Red for Ed movement that went on? What would you tell them if you were face-to-face around the policies, as Ed's question drove?
Well, here's what I would tell them, and I think they would agree with me. Our objective is to educate the young minds of these individuals, to educate them, to be able that they can take good information and decipher it and filter it to impact their lives. These are their lives, right? And so I think, and I've spoken to teachers, and teachers tell me, look, I just want to teach my kids. That's all I want to do. I got all these other regulations and all those requests that are stopping me or preventing me from teaching them. So there's a lot of regulations that are getting in the way. For me, there is no state policy necessarily says, here's what we're going to do. You got to start planting seeds. You plant seeds so that people start looking at how we're going to change the future. And one of the things that I would do, and I've seen it across the state, you can form joint private partnerships with companies that are dying for the workers because they're not coming through, right? Auto mechanics, welders, electricians. There are companies that are willing to donate that equipment and donate those tools, recognizing that, hey, if someone is a junior or senior and able to learn that craft, we can move them into a real career.
Would you ask employers to be more involved in this, or is this more of the state's responsibility?
I would ask more employers to get more involved. This is the mentor protege, the apprentice program, right? We all like to share our craft. We all like to share our wisdom and our knowledge with the younger generation if they're willing to listen to us and they're willing to learn. They're like little sponges. They just want to absorb the knowledge that's around them. And I think that's what we need to do is get back to helping all of us educate the younger generation. And I think small businesses can actually show them how they can achieve that dream.
I agree. And we will be right back. In the meantime, like and subscribe on our YouTube page. We'll be back in about 5 minutes, probably continuing this talk on education. Stay with us here on Connect and Collaborate, and find us at cobrt.com, #FindingCoGov. Back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer. And again, this is April 30th. It's the last day of the month, so we are hosting Finding Colorado's Next Governor. We have with us gubernatorial candidate, Republican candidate, Greg Lopez. Welcome again to Connect and Collaborate.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. We once again have Ed Sealiver with us with Denver Business Journal, who we have partnered with to bring you this series. And if you did miss it, we did have two forums back in March and February. You can find that on our website as well. Yeah. And Jeff Wasson, Cobert president here. I'm going to jump right over to you, let you finish
excited
this talk on
to keep
education.
The conversation coming. And actually, the conversations around education or priorities, it's really around budgeting, right? There's some newfound money to the state and how we spend that money and what is the priorities of the state. Is it transportation? Is it affordable housing? Is it the opioid crisis and mental health? Is it education? How do you prioritize a budget under a Greg Lopez administration? What's important to you? What would you like to see the money that comes into the state of Colorado spent on, Greg?
Well, here's what I would prioritize. You're a public servant. So when the public tells you what to spend money on, you need to follow that lead. We had Amendment 23. That amendment said we need to bring more money into education. And that was the vote of the people, right? And now we have the negative factor. It's $828 million that the state owes the educational fund. If you really are going to represent the wishes of the people, you need to listen to what they told you. It's not for you to do shenanigans with the budgets and try to do some other stuff. And that's why we have the problem with education now. I think it's even more prominent because we weren't doing what the people wanted us to do. So as governor, the first thing I'm going to do is listen to the people, make sure that we're following their lead. And when there is shortfalls, and I can tell you this, in any budget, there will always be shortfalls. There is always way too much demand and not enough revenue. So you have to prioritize, and so what has to happen, the governor needs to look at the totality of the situation, which issue is truly going to complement the state in the long run, and then it's up to him to make a case as to why he believes that's the situation to the General Assembly and the public. The public will let him know whether he's going down the right path or not. If you go out and talk to people in the forums, they will let you know in no uncertain terms what it is that they would like you to do. Okay? And so if you truly understand that you are a public servant and you are representing them, you will follow their lead. And if you can't convince them as to why they might look at it differently, that's not their fault. That's your fault because you haven't really connected with them yet to understand what their values are. So the priorities would be, first education. Why? Because we owe the money to the educational fund. And no one's talking about how we're going to pay them back. No one's talking about, hey, how do we write that check that we owe them? They're talking about transportation. They're talking about some other things. We need to prioritize as to how much money do we have. And in the long run, whatever we do, because government doesn't move quickly. Government moves slowly. So whatever decisions you're making, you probably won't see the impact of that decision for 4 to 5 years before you even realize if you're going down the right path or not. And so for me, I want to make sure that all 64 counties are benefiting from the decisions that are being made under the dome. I'm the only candidate that talks about 64 counties. I even ask all the people out there that, if you're going to make a contribution to my campaign, give me $64. And people ask why. It's because it's $1 for every county. Now, you can give me more, but $64 is what I want people to remember, that there are 64 counties in this state. And we got to watch out for all of us, not just some of us.
And obviously, one of the ways that we connect that state is through transportation. So if education is your number one priority, where does transportation fall, and where do we find the money to take care of our needs, assuming you think that we have transportation needs we need to take care of?
Well, there is a lot of transportation needs we need to take care of. But there's a difference between what type of needs are we going to follow and what type of needs we're not. In the urban corridor, the needs is about congestion. All they want to do is make sure that they don't get stuck in their cars for 2 hours, which I totally agree. You've worked a long day, whether you're a mom or a dad or a family member. You just want to get home to your family. You want to spend time with your kids. You want to spend time with your significant other. That's the only time that you really have an opportunity to bond with your family. And you don't want to get stuck 2 hours trying to get home and then realize, I don't even know why it took me 2 hours to get home. Today is like catching a plane. There was a time where you could know, hey, I got to be downtown and it'll take me 30 minutes. You can't make that assumption anymore. The other thing, but in rural Colorado, those roads are where we're carrying the product. Those are true interstate commerce roads. A lot of people forget, well, it's just people driving back and forth from the ranch. No, that is how we're getting the product to the industries that we need. And we forget that, well, it's only a 2-lane road. There's not many cars out here, but they're carrying a lot of product that we all consume. So we really need to look at what is the one priority. Is it the convenience of congestion of people to get home? Or are we looking at economic vitality to make sure that we have the good roads for all this product to be shipped out and shipped in, so that everybody feels good? It's a very delicate balance. Let me tell you, if it was a simple solution, somebody would have solved it already. I'm not the smartest man in the room, and I would never be the smartest man in the room. But what we do need to have is someone that can sit down and say, let's look at it in its totality. Let's look at it from the standpoint of where we're going to be in the next 5 years, 10 years, versus, well, let's just do something right now because everybody is complaining about I-25 between Colorado and Monument. That's certain things we need to look at. But the other thing that I want to ask is, well, how come we're not talking about other transportation corridors? We're just widening I-25. We're just widening I-70. All this growth that we're experiencing, we're still dumping onto the same corridors that we've always had. We're not even talking about building alternative corridors. Can you imagine what it would be like to get to the airport if you didn't have E470, as an alternative option? So these are the types of things that we need to look at.
And I think everybody would agree with you that it's a complex subject. But I mean, let's just start with the question of where does the money come from?
I think we have the money. Okay, I think there's enough money in the state budget right now in CDOT for us to really make some inroads. Now, are we going to have a lot of money to do all these projects? I'm going to tell you no, because every department will always bring you the biggest projects and the biggest price tag that they can come up with. And so for me, it's like, let's take it one step at a time. And the other thing that we need to evaluate, and this is how I run my household and I run my family. Is it a need or is it a want? There's a difference. And we need to make sure that anytime we have limited funds, we talk about, is this a need and what need are we fulfilling, or is this a want?
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify here. So we haven't raised the budget since 1991, and you still think that we have plenty of money to
look at the growth that we've experienced.
Exactly.
Right? And look at the revenue streams. I mean, every time there's more growth,
Yeah.
there's more taxes coming in.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Greg, let's drill into a little bit. You talked about growth several times, and certainly the congestion, you feel the impact of that. But you've got some things out there on some anti-growth measures, and you're seeing a little pushback against things like Amazon and the Olympics here. How does the policy around transportation impact growth, impact affordable, attainable worker housing, and how would you deal with this explosion of everybody wanting to come to Colorado?
Well, let me tell you this. When I was elected mayor, in 4 years, the town of Parker grew 160% in 4 years. Okay? So I dealt with the lack of roads. I dealt with the lack of schools. I dealt with the lack of parks. I dealt with the lack of jobs and commerce and industries. Everybody wants a solution. And everybody wants to go and say, here's what we're going to do. I've been there. Okay? You can say you're going to do this, but until you truly understand the totality of things, it's going to be tough. Here's what I see, though. Okay, being a former mayor, what I'm seeing around us right now is unmanaged growth. This is not smart growth. This is growth that's just happening because all of a sudden there's an interest for people to move to Colorado, and you got county commissioners, you got mayors, you got everybody say, well, let's just approve all these plats. Let's just approve all this stuff, right? Because everybody loves to see construction. I mean, think about it. The more cranes you see, the more excited people get. The more jobs people feel is being created. And that does happen. But you got to look at what is the pressure that it's putting on our water. What's the pressure that it's putting on our medical facilities and our emergency service, our police force, our fire departments? All these things are connected. So you can't just say, let's just open the floodgates and let's have everybody move in here if you don't truly have a good plan on how you're going to manage all this growth. And so, I think there's going to be a lot of debate because a lot of people are feeling that we are no longer Colorado. We're becoming California. And nobody wants to be the ugly twin sister of California.
And so just give us a little idea. What would your plan for managing growth be?
I think it would be sitting down at the Denver Regional Council of Governments, the Metro Mayors Caucus, and asking them, are you prepared for these master plans? If you guys have not seen a master plan of a community, they're planned out 20 years. And so everybody has a 20-year plan as how they want their city to grow or the county to grow. But it's really difficult to kind of bring those together to see how is the state going to grow? Where are these roads going to come from? And so I would sit down and really evaluate and talk with the mayors, talk with the county commissioners and say, help me understand how you guys see this corridor working and making sure that we're working together as a state. Because we also need to make sure that we have economic vitality in Durango, Grand Junction, Pueblo. Pueblo's feeling abandoned. I mean, they have an airport, they have a heavy rail, they have a college. I mean, they have everything that you would want in a nice little metropolitan city, yet nobody seems to be promoting their environment.
Beyond the idea of areas growing, businesses want to grow in this state. Some say they feel they've been hampered in their growth in this state. How do you feel the state's business environment is? What would you change, if anything, in terms of the regulatory atmosphere or other things that go into the business environment?
Well, I could tell you, and I tell this to everybody across the state, the most powerful people in government are not the elected officials. It's the regulators. It's the regulators that are the most powerful people in government because they get to determine how they're going to apply the rules and the spirit and intent of the legislation that got passed by the elected officials. And so we, as governor, I will reevaluate all these regulations, and I can tell you there's a number of regulations that I truly feel are strangling the growth and the opportunity for small businesses to become bigger. Did you know that the state of Colorado has no goals on how much they're going to spend with small businesses? As a state, there is no goal for the state of Colorado to say, out of our budget, we'd like to see the state spend 6%, 8% of our budget with small business. And that is just wrong. When a state does not champion the thing that makes us great, which is small business, that is a message that is sending that, we're not truly supportive of small business and creating an economic environment for small business. We just give it a lot of lip service.
Now, just because you mentioned that there are a number of regulations strangling them, give me one or two that you really see as being strangling to small business.
Well, I can tell you from my own experience, I own a little restaurant bar. I got a notification that my Tri-County health fee is going to triple in the next 3 years with no explanation. They come by once a year to do an inspection. You visit with them, you do whatever they want to do. But I can tell you this, a regulator will never walk away from an inspection with a clean report. Mm-hmm. They will always have to find something, to make sure that they go back and say, well, this business was not doing it correctly. And I can tell you that in talking to other industries, they've said, Greg, can you please look at these regulations because it's hurting us. And I will look at them. At the federal level, I'll give you a perfect one. China with the lead, the lead in the paint. I had motorcycle companies, shops coming to me and say, Greg, we're not allowed to sell little mini bikes anymore because the tank has lead paint in it, and someone's concerned that a 3-year-old or 5-year-old is going to start licking the tank, and that's where they're going to get the lead poisoning from. It's like, there's a level of understanding and common sense, but we got to really look at it. What are these regulations, and what was the intent of the law? Because the most powerful people in government are the regulators.
Got to strike that, obviously, that healthy balance, right, between overreach. And let's shift a little bit to our state's largest unfunded liability, and it's certainly heating up as we enter the last 7 days at our state legislature. Promises made, promises kept, right? We've got an attraction and a retention issue right now with this unfunded liability and how it impacts those same people, Red for Ed, that we're picketing about ensuring that they're taken care of and their retirement and that commitment to serve and educate our kids. Right. What do you do to fix para?
Well, remember, I'm a former financial planner advisor. we're talking about people's lives here. We're talking about their future. So we can't just look at a balance sheet and say, hey, let's just balance the numbers. And once we balance the numbers, everything will be fine. Because we did make a promise to these people, and they don't have Social Security. This is their Social Security. I think, from my perspective, the first thing we need to do is really identify what went wrong with PARA. You know, the 14-member board of trustees, 9 members that sit on that 14-member board are member benefit individuals. Every decision they make as it pertains to that board, they're going to reap the benefits because they're member benefits of that. You know, the governor gets to appoint 3. You have the state treasurer on there, and then you have a retired member participant. What I'd like to see is we make that board an advisory board, and we create another board that focuses on the fiduciary responsibility of making sure that the investments and decisions that are being made by this organization is looking into the future. They don't have a connection as to whether the benefits are going to fit their lifestyles, or if they're going to have to enjoy their vacation, whatever it may be. These are individuals that are looking at it strictly from an investment standpoint to make sure that the fund is solvent. What we would do, what I can see, is that we would take 3 or 4 of those members of the advisory board and bring them up to that board that's making the decision so that they can participate and they can share with them their vantage point as to what's happening. But they will not have the majority vote on the board. I think if we can stabilize the decisions from that perspective, then we know we're not going to run into this in the future. At least we hope not, because we have people that truly understand the markets, truly understand the actuary tables and the rates of returns and management fees, portfolio managers, all those types of things. What we can do then is focus on what are we going to do with the benefits program. And there will be some changes. We got to make some changes. There is no way we can continue to move forward in the models that we're at right now.
That's the governance structure, and you talked about another board, which someone may or may not argue that's needed, may be done with the existing board and restructuring the design of that. But how do you actually crack that unfunded liability? How do you ensure their solvency? What do you deal with the age issue that's there, and indexing and some of those other issues? Governance is a key part, don't get me wrong, I agree with you, but there's more than that that has to be done.
But you have Walker Stapleton sit on the board for 8 years. Okay, so it's a very complex issue. It's not like someone can come in. I mean, anybody can come in and say, okay, everybody from this point forward, we're going to give you a defined contribution plan. Contribution right? Versus benefits. Everybody from this, that's the easy way to do it, because you're just drawing a line in the sand and say, hey, if you're on the wrong side of the track, I don't know what to tell you. You're on the right side of the track, you're going to be happy. But we've made some commitments. And I think what we need to do is evaluate, how do we make this a transition that doesn't hurt as bad as people perceive it's going to hurt? But we're all going to be a part of this. It's not one group versus another. We are all going to have to participate on this, because it is a huge unfunded mandate. And so I can see where, the retirees are going to have to give a little, taxpayers are going to have to probably give a little, we're going to have to restructure the board. It's going to take a while for us to really recognize what is the right rate of return that we can project. A 7.25% return on these investments is one of the big reasons why we're not where we should be. And again, the actuary tables aren't really keeping up with what life expectancies are today. They've adjusted them, but this thing didn't happen overnight. And so when you have the hundreds of thousands of people on there, it's a tough issue to discuss.
Speaking of tough issues to discuss, healthcare is one of the most important issues for almost any business person you talk to, particularly the rising cost of healthcare. What role should the government play in looking at that issue, and what would you do as governor?
One of the first things I think we need to ask is, why does healthcare cost so much? Transparency. Medicaid is not healthcare. Medicaid is just a means by which we pay for healthcare. And so anytime healthcare realizes that government has a program by which people can pay for their services, human nature would tell you can raise your rates because there's a program that helps pay for those services. Let's talk first about, what does it cost so much to go through the emergency room? Why does it cost so much to get an x-ray? My biggest fear right now is the rising cost of prescriptions as it pertains to our seniors. the baby boom population is retiring quickly. And they're the ones that are going to have to deal with all these added costs in prescription drugs, medical services. I'd like to see throughout the state more individual clinics. There's programs in Pueblo from doctors that are coming to me and say, hey, this is a model that we're doing. People are coming forward and say, hey, what do you think about this model as it pertains to the state? I'm in the investigation process right now. I need to evaluate these. Again, common sense from the standpoint of why does it cost so much to provide health care, and why are we charging so much? Under the Obamacare, I was a director of SBA. Part of my job description was to go out there and explain Obamacare to small business owners. And small business owners are like, what, this is the worst thing that anybody could ask me to do. One, I don't truly understand it. All I know that it's costing me more money, and I can't even explain it to my employees what it is that I'm buying for them. So let's simplify this a little bit, or let's make sure that they understand what they're buying. Because right now a lot of people can't even pay their deductibles. They think they have health insurance, but they really can't afford to use health insurance because of the cost. So again, these are complicated issues that we are going to have to kind of sit down at the table and make sure that we peel back all the issues. All we know is that they're difficult to solve, but we got to stay at the table. We can't say we tried and walk away.
Let's talk a little bit about that. We're winding up Governor Hickenlooper's 8th and final year in office. Share something that you've admired, respected about Governor Hickenlooper and his terms of service, and then what are you going to do differently if the voters of Colorado put Greg Lopez in that governor's mansion? How do you run? What would you change? What would that look like that you would take a different tact or approach than the current governor?
What do I admire? That's a hard one. Okay. I can tell you this. The one thing that I will always give Governor Hickenlooper, when he ran his campaigns, he focused on his mission. He focused on his message. Never really got into the negative stuff. He allowed people to listen to him. And he had some of those commercials that we all remember, driving a little scooter down the street, coming out of a plane. Those are the things that I think allowed him to connect with the voter. Okay?
What do you do differently?
What would I do
How
differently?
would you govern differently?
Well, the way I would govern differently is I would go out and actually touch the communities. I would actually go out and talk to rural Colorado, talk to these areas and these groups and organizations, and really have dialogue. It's not one where you come in and do a 30-minute speech at a luncheon and you say, I was there, and you leave. It's one where you sit down and you evaluate what is going on so we can help. I think I would be more of a hands-on governor to make sure that we're actually moving forward.
Speaking of what you've done, what did you learn from your term at the SBA, being in charge of the SBA here, and both in good and bad, evaluating yourself going forward?
I learned again, with small business is the heart and soul of any economy. Small business is what really brings hope and vitality to any community. As a governor, I would always champion small business because small business is what makes Colorado and America great. What I've learned also in the federal government, there's always these regulations because someone wants to have their fingerprints on making a difference. And it's not about creating opportunity. It's about putting rules and regulations so everybody can march in unison. And I don't think that's good necessarily when you have an economy and different viewpoints as to how we're going to move forward.
The Colorado Business Roundtable, this kicks off Small Business Week in America, and President Trump proclaimed that this week. So thank you for referencing that. Craig, how do people find you? How do people get involved in supporting your campaign for governor?
If you want to learn more about who Greg Lopez is, go to www.lopezforgovernor.com. We have videos, we have position papers. That's really where you'll find out where I'm at. And hopefully you'll find out, go to one of our events, and listen and reach out.
Thank you so much. You can find this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. It's been a pleasure, Greg.
Thank
and
you.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.